this now is because of a planned offensive in Idlib province. So colored in red here is Idlib. This is the last major stronghold of the Syrian rebels. And of course, we know that the Syrian civil war kicked off in 2011. It was a lot of domestic discontent about the condition of the country, people upset with the rule of Bashar al-Assad, who rules from the capital in Damascus. And over the course of the 7-year war, we've seen that first the rebels had the upper hand and Assad was really on the ropes. And then with Russian intervention by 2015, Assad started to be on the upswing. He started to win the war. And so in white here is everything that the Assad government controls. The last major strongholds of rebels are up here in Idlib province. And then down here, this is also rebels. They're both run by the same organization, and we'll get into who that is in a moment. I colored them differently, though, because the focus is on Idlib. But, I mean, these are the same so-called moderate rebel faction. They're actually affiliated with Al-Qaeda, but, you know, the government lies to you. This is ISIS over here. This is the last major stronghold of ISIS in Syria. The map isn't really drawn to scale so much, so this is a little bit bigger in real life. Up here in blue is the Kurds, and you have about 2,000 American troops in blue here in the east of Syria, the northeast. They're operating with the Kurds to eliminate ISIS. And there's additionally over, I think, 3,000 American contractors there as well. So it's about 5,000. Those are unofficial, semi-official estimates of how many Americans, but they're all in the west here. And then up in the green here is rebels, but also Turkish forces. So remember, in February, we started to talk about this. This was in spring 2018. Turkey took part in this major military operation, actually going across state lines, invading Syria with the help of the rebels to establish control of the city of Afrin, and that's up here. And then they worked their way east and stopped at Manbij because there were American forces there. And for a long time, we were talking about that was going to be a big conflict because Erdogan, who's the president of Turkey, said, we're going to take Manbij, we're going to take all this, we're going to start in Afrin, then we're just going to keep marching east all the way until we take over the entire Syrian border with Turkey. And so there was a lot of concern that Turkey would attack Manbij and attack America, and Turkey's in NATO, as is America, so this would be a major catastrophe diplomatically, but they ended up stopping. And so that's the basic, this is where we are. This is where we are in the region. This is where we are in time in the Civil War. These are the various factions. Like I said, the white is the government, clearly the biggest. Assad has consolidated control of around 75% of the country. I think those are the major estimates. This is the most up-to-date map, by the way, as well. So if you Google, like, Syria Civil War map, it may look different, but this is the most up-to-date. This is from live.syria map or something like that. There's a website that details the day-to-day updates on territory changes and that kind of thing. So this is where we are now. These are the various factions. Turkey in green, America and the Kurds in blue, the rebels in red and orange, ISIS in black, and then the government in white. And the forces at play in terms of the pro-government, so the white is the Assad government. That's the government that has been ruling in Syria for 40 years now or 50 years now, taken over by Hafez, I believe, al-Assad in the 1970s. So he's technically the rightful sovereign. He's technically the legitimate ruler of Syria. And obviously that's the white, that's the capital, Damascus. Russia has been supporting them, and Iran has been supporting them. So this faction is all in white. Against Assad, you have America and the Kurds, who are in blue. You have Turkey, who's in green. You have Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates, who've been giving material support to the rebels, including ISIS, by the way, through Turkey. And that's been going on since, I think, 2013 and 2014. So technically, they would be the black, the red, and the orange. And then you have HTS, which is the largest anti-government coalition affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and they are actually the people running Idlib and running this area down in the southeast. And so this is where we are. The big news, of course, why we're talking about the Syrian civil war again is because of a planned offensive on the Idlib province. And the reason that this is a big deal is because this is the last major rebel stronghold. So if Assad takes over this area, basically the Syrian civil war, I mean, it's not over. They still have to resolve ISIS, of course. They have to resolve how to incorporate. I mean, the Kurdish area is clearly the biggest area not under control of the government. They still have to figure out how they're going to incorporate the Kurds back into the Syrian government. And it was an unstable coalition from the start. You have to consider that Syria comprises Sunnis, Shiites, Alawites, and Kurds. So it was a very tenuous position to begin with. And then when the war exploded, now it's going to be very difficult to put it back together again. So while this is the largest area not under government control, if Assad takes over this area in Idlib, and this doesn't really have any major cities, this is not really a big deal, then in a way, basically the civil war is over. To the extent that Assad can reclaim and liberate areas controlled by rebels without going to war with another country, he'll have done his job 100%. For him to go after the Kurds, he'd be going to war with America. For him to go after Afrin, he'd be going to war with Turkey. And so basically, he takes over Idlib and the war's over. And why that's a big deal is, number one, it would be a very bloody battle. It's a very urban population in Idlib, very densely populated. There's about 3 million people there. And the reason for that is because Idlib is one of 4 de-escalation zones. And again, there's a lot to take care of here. So I don't know if maybe I'll explain that later. But so a big reason why Idlib is so densely populated is because all the other areas, when Assad was just ravishing the Syrian countryside, and I mean that in the best way possible, as he's taking over, reclaiming control of the country, rebels have been fleeing to Idlib. So Idlib was already densely populated, already had a big population, but people from Aleppo, people from all over southeastern Idlib, where Assad has already taken over, they've all been fleeing to this area. So it's already populated. Now you've got many thousands and thousands of rebels fleeing there. So it's about 3 million people. It would be a phased operation, and nobody really wants it to be that way, but it would be the case that it would probably be a pretty long and bloody siege. It's estimated that there's between 20,000 and 70,000 rebel fighters, with at least 10,000 of them affiliated with Al-Qaeda. So there's a lot of terrorists, a lot of fighters. It would be a major humanitarian disaster. And why that's a big deal for Turkey and why Turkey opposes it is, of course, because if Syria moves ahead and Russia does airstrikes and Syria and Iran invade, where do you think the refugees from Idlib are going to go? Where do you think, if it turns into this kind of urban conflict, this insurgency warfare, guerrilla warfare, where do you think the children, women, millions of people, they say about 800,000 could be displaced, where do you think they're going? They're going directly north into occupied Afrin and then eventually into Turkey. And so that's why, that's the stated reason that everybody opposes it. That's clearly why Turkey opposes it. Already Turkey is inundated with refugees from the Syrian civil war. The resident Turks are not happy about it. They don't like them. It's putting a strain on the Turkish government. So they don't want the refugees. Additionally, they don't want Sunnis to die. It would be a lot of bloodshed. And Erdogan sees himself as like the ultimate leader of Sunni Islam, or is positioning himself in that way. And so it would be a major loss of credibility if he were to allow that to go through. America opposes this because then, that's a big repudiation of American foreign policy. So Turkey clearly has a reason to oppose this. They don't want the refugees, and also it would be an affront to Erdogan's credibility. America opposes this in a big way because that means that Bashar al-Assad wins. If Assad takes over Idlib, and it would only be a matter of time, America doesn't have any troops there, so they can't prevent this from happening. It's Al-Qaeda. There's not a lot of American assets there. So America is not really in a position to stop this, at least on the ground. Assad takes over. He wins eventually. Bloodshed, no bloodshed. And America, who's been opposing Assad for years and saying he's not the rightful ruler of Syria, he will be overthrown, he's a dictator, he uses chemical weapons, and Russia's trying to meddle and Iran's taking over. all of that would just blow up in America's face. We'd be embarrassed. We'd be humiliated. And look, Americans don't support this war. When